All right, good morning. Thank you for coming to the May 2024 training. This is a follow-up. Evan did a great job last month on feature lines and surfaces. We're going to do a little bit more now with building on that concept of feature lines and using the grading creation tools in order to tie off, create, expand our grading options. All right. So today we'll have handouts and sample files will be located on the S drive in the CAD training files, monthly CAD training folder. Those will all be added after the session this morning. So that's where you can find it and test and go through the project as we saw it here at today's training. What are grading creation tools? Grading creation tools allows us to create grading based off a certain criteria and style, and then allow us to manipulate that as a whole in order to improve our design or check other design options quickly. We're going to be using feature lines like we had last month's training, target surfaces, and grading styles. Like I said, we'll use these anytime that you want to try to propose a surface and tie it into existing is a good place to use these grading tools. When you want to have a dynamic surface that wants to be able to, you need to check to see if the elevation should be raised or lowered for earthwork checks, balances, just to make it sure it all looks good. And then, like I said, in order to get optimized earthworks, we'll show you how to do some of that stuff today, figure out how we can use it in our future designs, and integrate it in with feature lines and surfaces. All right, that short slideshow, we're going to get right into the presentation in CAD. Okay. Now, for some reason, I don't know. Can anybody see the actual surface I have on the screen? Doesn't look like it's showing up for some reason. This could cause a problem right away because you cannot see my surfaces. I'm not quite sure why. I can switch to other items and they're just not showing up at all. One moment, we'll fix that. Oop, did that fix it? No. All right, let's try this. All right, now you should be able to see all of my surface that I have here. It might look a little familiar as far as our training project. But in this case, we're going to be looking at just using the creation tools in order to build a small basin. We have this area down here. We got an existing surface. We have a little bit of a contour labels that we can adjust. So the very first thing we're going to do is look at the grading toolbar, grading creation tools toolbar. That can be found right up here under grading, and you would hit grading creation tools. Now you need to have an existing surface to do this example project because one of the things that you need to have for grading creation is a target surface. In this case, a target surface is anything that you want the software to grade to. And that, in this case, is going to be our existing surface. There's also the very first thing, we're just going to go right across the top here. This first button is the grading group. It works kind of like sites. It's part of, obviously you can go right in here and figure out that there's a site right away. We already have a proposed base and grading site, so we're going to use that as our template. This allows us to create surfaces that do not interact with each other so that we can adjust and check different design criteria without making a big mess of everything else. So on this next window here, it's asking us to give us a name. We're going to go basin. And we want it, or let me see, I'll actually call it PR basin. And this will allow us, because this will create, we're going to have it automatically create a surface using the group name, which is the up here, grading group. We're going to make this look, and it's just like any other surface. We're going to go down through here, set our settings. So this is all going to be proposed. So we want our proposed 1s and 5s. And these other things we can leave go for right now. Hit OK. Those settings are duplicated again. They all look good. So we hit OK again. All right, so now you can see we have a group called PR Basin right there. The next icon on the toolbar is the Set Target Surface. Like I said, you have to have a target surface in order to do the grading creation tools. In this case, we are going to use what's called EG in this example. This was a land XML file that was brought in. So it's a surface that's all created from that. Hit OK. And you'll see again, right there, it highlights, it lists it as EG. Now the next button we really don't need to do much with. I'll show it to you. It's going to show what layer all of our object that we're grading on will be on. We already have this set up in the template to go to the PRCon object. This works a lot like blocks, where this is the main home layer. The items that are displayed on the screen can be on different layers, but you can control the entire object by freeze, thaw, turn on and off that layer there by itself. This gets really tricky sometimes when you click on something and you don't know why it's not turning off. This is the reason why. All right, the next thing we have criteria set. Again, you do not need to worry about changing these at this time. We only have the standard set. They've already been customized to the most common items that we use here in the office. The next window is one of our standard grading options, types of style, really. It has criteria on what it's going to do, how it's going to grade it out. We'll go into that in a little bit after we start the demonstration. Okay, so let's do that anyways. So we need to have a surface, existing surface in Civil 3D. And then what we also want to try to do is estimate the top elevation of the proposed basin berm. Well, we can look at here. Our elevation is 1220 there, so that means that's 1228. So we need to be higher than that. So let's say we have if we have 3 foot above, 3 or 4 foot above this elevation, we should be pretty good for the basin top. So all you have to do on this case is you can just draw a polyline. Of a rough shape. Now hopefully you'll have an idea from calculations from the environmental department what size we kind of need, and then that way you can get the layout a little bit more accurate the first try. So there we go. We got a line, polyline, I should say. Let's say we convert that, and then we'll get rid of this, remove that vertex. So we have one polyline That's completely around there. We can move it. It's individual. Now, the next step we want to make sure is, okay, what elevation, if this is the top of the berm, what elevation should that be set to? Like I said, we're going to probably go about 4 or 5 feet above the lowest outfall. So this is 1218. So let's set this at 12, I don't know, 23. So nice and simple, just a regular elevation. Now, I do recommend that you do not put the elevation at an even contour number or elevation number. This allows the contours to be rendered a little bit easier. So even if it's a 0.05, this should work really well and show your contours properly whenever we go to build our surfaces. If you do it right at the actual elevation, even elevation, it can cause problems with contours crossing over the berms and such. So I'm going to set this at 1223.05. And there we go. Okay, so we have our elevation. We are ready to start looking at, well, actually, the next thing we would need is to convert this to be a feature line. And that's easy enough. We can select it, go up to feature line, create feature lines from objects, and it's make sure we're on the same site. We'll go down through here. All this other stuff looks good. We already have an elevation assigned to it. We don't have to change that. It's going to put it on our proposed feature lines layer, and we don't need that polyline once it's a feature line, so we can say erase. You'll see it changed to orange, which is the default color for the feature line layer. If I select it, we look at properties, it's going to show us the elevations. It's going to show us that everything seems to work, have been converted over properly to a feature line. Now we have our grading tools. So again, to open that up, you just go to grading, grading creation tools. Double check to make sure that you have a site or that you create a group and it's assigned to the correct site. And then also you want to make sure that you have your that it's set up to build a new surface, and we gave it a name, so we can look at that already. Right there's our PR basin surface already in here from what we did earlier. We are then going to make sure we have our surface that we want to grade to, our target surface selected. That's our EG. And now we can start looking at our different styles we have pre-configured. Now in this case, the first step I would do for doing a basin is I want to grade to a distance. That's this option right here. This will allow us to select our feature line and give it a width, essentially, of what we want with that. So now we can go to this right here, which is the grading, create grading button. You'll notice there's a little arrow. We'll look at some of the, got some other options in here, but we want to start with just create grading. Now it's going to ask us to select the feature line that we want to use. So we just have to click on that. The next thing it's going to ask is what side do you want to grade to? Now in this case, this is our top of our berm. Let me see. So on this one, we're going to actually grade to the outside. And it's going to ask us, do we want to apply this to the entire length? In this case, we're going to say no. And I'll explain here shortly. All right. So now it's going to ask us, where do we want to start grading? Now, we're going to grade to a distance. And that distance usually is 10 feet for top of berms. So we need to find, if we're going to put this at, what did I say, 1223? Actually, we're kind of in trouble because we're already higher than the existing grade. So 1223 might have been a little too high. Let me back up here for a second. We can select this feature line. If we right click, we have the option to raise and lower. I'm going to just lower it 1 foot, -1. If we check now, that now shows us that our top of our berm is at 1222.05. All right, so let's get that going. Okay, now we're going to hit this. Select on the feature line, select to the outside in this case, and say no. Now what we want to do is, since our top of our line is at 1222.05, we want to estimate roughly where that would be. So it would be somewhere right around in here on the existing surface. Okay, and now it's going to say, it says confirm the station, and then it's going to say how far do you want to go with the other line. Well, over here, this is the 1222 the whole way through. We want to pick somewhere over in here. Again, confirm the station, and now it's going to ask for the distance, and we can type in 10. Make sure you keep checking the command line to see what exactly they're asking for. Okay, now it's also going to say slope or grade. In this case, it's going to be a level base and berm, so we can do grade, that's fine, and we can say 0. All right, so what you see there is our grading object, the first steps of this whole process. From here, we can start to really press things around, move things around, and I'm going to right click. Actually, I guess it's like escape. Now, if we look over here, our PR basin, we need to put this to rebuild. We need to make sure that it is 1s and 5s. Okay. So the grading objects are typically, our main home point is this diamond shape. Okay, so if you find that diamond, you can usually find that. That's how you select the whole grading object. If you go and you select just a line and do something with just this outside line, there could be issues. So you want to be careful not to have any kind of deleting or anything like that in this case, because then it would cause a problem. So if you need to delete the entire object, you would click on the diamond area. And that's how you would get also the specialized properties just for that grading object. Okay, so there we go. We have our berm. And you'll say, that looks great. Don't really see anything going on yet. That's because it's the same elevation. There is no actual change in elevation, so there's no contours to be drawn. But this is our first step that we need to build off of to tie into the existing surface. But I do see we're going to be way too close to the property line here, so we'll have to mess with that a little bit later. The next step is hey, we need to change our grading to go down to the surface. So under the style, we would then pull out our 3:1 to surface style, click on the create grading again, and now it's asking which feature line. This is actually a feature line as part of the grading object. So we can actually click on that. And in this case, we do want to apply to the entire length because our berm runs all the way along there. So we can hit yes. It's going to verify that what your slope is, 3:1. You can just right click on that. And if there's any fill slope, it's also 3:1. And what you'll see is that, hey, there's our contours we're looking for. Now I hit escape to get out of that command, and you'll see, hey, we got a diamond here, and now we have a diamond here because we have two individual grading objects, but they are linked to each other. Now, obviously, we are way too close to the contours or to the property lines, so we need to move our base feature line. If we move that, you'll notice our grading objects are all linked to it, it also moves the grading objects, and it recalculates our surface, our contours, and how it would tie in. So again, we can just select move, just kind of slide those around, and our grading will change. So right now, that looks pretty good. We're getting close to the property line. We don't want to be too close to the property line. We might even be able to move that a little bit farther to the right. We need to make sure we have our required distance from the property line for our grading, which I think is probably 5 feet. So we're somewhere around in there now. Okay, so that's great. That's our first grading object there. And you'll see, if we zoom way in here, the second grading object that we did, let me see, sorry, there's this diamond. Wherever you see that outside daylight line touch the original line, that is where it transfers from fill to cut. That's important to note because we need to make sure that we have that all adjusted properly. Now, the reason why we didn't put this berm the whole way around is because this is all higher, and this will all be cut and doesn't need to have the 10-foot berm like the fill area does. So we're going to clean this other side up. Next, we're going to click on Create Grading. We're still going to do 3 to 1. This time we select on the original feature line. We select the outside. And notice it didn't give us the option of, did you want to do the entire thing? Because there's already a grading object. So it knows it can't overlap the grading objects for that. But we need to get pretty close. So we can start here and verify. And the little arrow draws right around there. We can click over here and verify. Again, it's going to say, what's the slope? 3 to 1. It's the default. And there we go. So now we have our cut side of the basin created. And then it's going to be tying off to our existing. Now you'll notice this contour right here doesn't really tie into anything. So that means that must be the, let me see, what is that? That's the 23 contour, 1223. Yep. What we can do is grab this end line here. See how it has a slider grip on there. We can slide that around until it gets past the existing surface contour, and there it ties right in. So you may have a little bit of contours that are just slightly off from tying in. Like this would be the 23 here that should be tying in to there. We can slide that a little closer, but you cannot have them overlap. Oops. It will not allow you to overlap that. See, I can't even get any closer with that. Oh, there we go. We can't get it. So you can get it fairly close. It may not be exact, but it should be good enough for what we need on that end. Let's go over here, take a quick look here. Do we need to, this contour is good. That contour there ties in, and there's, so it looks like we're good here. We may actually, let me select that. This looks like a strange contour there. So let's slide this back some to here. And that should clean up our contours quite well. We're going to, so this is a 2023 or 1223 going this way, the 1223 going that way. Well, actually, we might need to pull this back quite a bit. Now that we look at this, because that right there is the 1222. Is that right? Yes. Okay. No, that's right. Because we lowered the original feature line down to 1222.05. We should be real good right there. Okay, so now we have our rough grading of the exterior of the basin. We have the cut on this side. We have the berm and the fill on this side. Looks decent. Now the interior. And again, we're going to use the same techniques that we used on the outside. We can actually take and do another grading object. We're going to use our 3 to 1. You'll have to refer to the township. Some of them have different standards as far as what the slopes are allowed to be within the basins. So check with that, but we'll stick with the 3 to 1 for now. Hit the create grading, select the feature line, and we can select on the inside. In this case, we can go, if we want this to be a flat base and bottom, we can go the entire length. So we're going to say yes. We're going to, oh, actually, I'm going to take that back. I missed a little step here. Escape. Instead of 3:1 to surface, we actually want to use a grade to an elevation, or grade to a relative elevation. The difference between these two would be if you already know what elevation the base and bottom would be, you could go right to that elevation. Or if you knew that you wanted to have 4 foot of depth in your basin, you could use a relative. We're going to use relative because that's going to allow us to slide the basin around, and it won't adjust the bottom of the basin, or it won't keep the bottom of the basin at the same elevation. So let's try this. Grade to relative elevation, select your feature line, select the side. Yes, we want it to go the whole way. Okay, so relative elevation, let's say we want it -4. And then it's going to ask, okay, grade or slope? We'll go with slope. That is the 3:1, so we just have to type 3. And there's our interior grading for that basin. I can hit escape. We're not selected anymore, and you can see that it has little tick marks showing that those are closed contours. And now we have a basin that is graded to the bottom, to the elevation of, let me see, that should be, I don't know if I can, oh, that's that, yeah. This bottom line is not a contour. That's the daylight of the grading object. If you remember, we said that our top thing was just about 0.05, so it was just slightly higher than a contour. So that is why you don't see that last contour, or it's very close to that last contour. So there we go. There's our entire surface. Each one of these diamonds is a grading object that can be modified independently of each other if you need to. If you had to move this, you still could. Now the problem will be is that our endpoints for the berm will need to be adjusted, because if we push it way back, now we might not be tying in all our contours. So you can see over here, this contour is not tying in properly. On the other side, it's definitely not tying in. We got to pull it way back to here in order to get to tie in right. And wherever that daylight hits our original object, that's where the cut versus the fill begins. So we would have to pull this one way back. Well, let's just do that. Let's see, that would be this segment right here. Pull that the whole way back to here. Then we'd also have to pull this one back to there. And same thing over here. So you always have to move the original for the farthest back. I mean, well, you don't have to always, but you won't. If you want all of them to move, you have to. So actually, I can take that one to there, and you'll see the contour hit right on there. I guess what I should have been saying is, if you used this one, it would be hard to drag that one because there's just a very small area. But you could move just that outside 3:1. If there was a reason why you needed a 4:1 slope or some other percent slope, you would have to pull that one back, and then you'd put another grading object in there. All right. So we have some of the basin. It looks good, but it's not a true surface yet. Because if we go into here and we do a quick object viewer, if I rotate this, let's see here, we can do shaded. Maybe not. I don't know. And it's not shown for some reason there. But we can see our contours. They all have different elevations. You can see where they go, where they break, where the berm is. If I can get this to go back to where I want it to go. So go in there. Not too bad. Maybe conceptual. No, but it's not showing us rendering. What I wanted hope to show you is this surface does not have a bottom. Right now, this is just a hole inside the basin. In order for it to be a full basin so we can run earthworks and such on it, we need to do one more step to make sure it will work. And that's where this drop down comes in. Underneath there, there's something that's called create infill. It's very simple. You don't have much options. It says create infill. It says where's your infill. It highlights. You'll notice how the inside line kind of turns blue when I go inside here. You click inside, and that's all you need to do. You now have a grading object inside here, and that completes the basin surface. It keeps that bottom there. If you didn't have it, it wouldn't calculate those areas for earthworks. And that's, you have to have that in there in order for your surface to be complete. And that's pretty much the basin creation. Um, can be a little tricky. You just have to realize, be careful with your diamonds. Those are your grips. If you need to move an entire or delete an entire grading object, you need to select the diamonds. Let me give you a demonstration. If you, I hate to do this because it can cause problems. If you only select this outside line and hit delete, yes, the surface goes away, but it's not always the best. That diamond will show up later on if there's a reason for it to overlap another object. So I just did undo and it's back. And then you can have this as a separate surface. When you when you do your other proposed grading, you can have these all pasted into your final surface. All right, let's see here. Some other buttons that are a little bit more advanced on this. Over here, we have our grading. We can go in there and do different edits to the grading. You know, I typically do not usually do much with this at this point. Let's see, pick a side and hack. But you can go in here and say, okay, I want this to be a 5:1. And you can see it change the contours. There we go. So now that's a 5:1 slope outside. So it can be useful. Like I said earlier, if the inside grading of your basin has to be 4:1 instead of 3:1, or you can do that. You can just click on that. You go. Now in this case, you'd have to go in the area in between your original feature line and the bottom, but not here because this is your infill. It won't let you change that. Now, okay, we want to change this to be, oh, this is relative elevation. Let's say we need another foot. We could always hit -5, slope, and that would do it. That added another foot to our inside depth. So now we are at, let's see, what is it? Oh, there we go. Our basin elevation's at 1217.05. That's going to be that's too low to get a pipe out. So that won't work. So that's a good option there to kind of look at that and say, okay, this is how I can adjust this. Back to a -4, slope 3:1, and that will take that back out. And there our elevation is back to 1218.05, which still might be a little bit too low, but maybe in that case, let's say we raise up, we grab the original feature line, we can go in here and we can say raise and lower, and we want to say plus 0.5. So you can see all of our grading adjusted. We would have to adjust our tie-in points for 2 of the feature or grading objects so that it ties off properly. But now our base and bottom is 1218.55. If this is the 1218, that might give us a good area that we could pull back and have our discharge pipe down in this corner. Let me show you one other thing real quick just to show what the infill does. Let's say I select that. If we didn't have the infill, notice we do not get an elevation that pops up for the basin. That will be a good giveaway if you have an infill in there or not. If you do not have a proposed basin or whatever the surface is for the basin that you had called it listed there, that means it's not part of the surface. And that's why we need to have that infill. So as soon as I did that, if I hover, now our PR basin has an elevation of 1218.55. And again, you can always go back and you can adjust where your grading objects begin and end so that all your contours properly tie in. So it looks like we're a little off there. This probably needs to be pulled back quite a bit. Let me see. That's the inside. This one. Oh, nope. See, this one's real small right there. So you have to be careful, watch out for those kinds. And that can be pulled back to here. As long as it crosses that tie-in contour, you should be in good shape. Now I can select this one, bring it back. Actually, this would have to go even farther because we need to get that contour right there to tie in. So this is one of those situations where you may not be able to get both of your feature line or your grading objects to properly tie into your contours, because you just can't have those two things cross over. It's a judgment thing. I think we could probably pull this one back a little bit farther just so that we get our berm to tie in. But we'd have to pull that pretty back. So there is some issues with this in these situations, but you can adjust it, see what works the best, and go from there. Now, the last thing on, I'm going to skip over a couple of these because I don't use them a lot. Well, actually, we have grading volume tools, a little bit more advanced. Here's your edit button. It will bring up a separate window to edit the grading object that you're looking at. Let me see if I can do that. You probably won't see it because it's off the screen. It brings up more of a chart, so you can go in here and type different options in for whatever you're doing. So that's another way of editing. That's that green dot there. Now if I can get this moved back so we can actually see what's going on. Oh, there we go. Panorama. Move that back over. That's in the panorama. So that would be this one. This here is your grading editor, elevation editor, same kind of thing. Brings up the elevation editor for whatever grading group you're looking at. You can go in here, really get detailed. You should be doing this all with feature lines at that stage usually. So, okay, let me get out of that one. Grading group properties, you can go through that. That's just additional properties that we set at the beginning. You know, if we had another surface at the time, we could have used the volume base surface, created and had everything created with cut and fill. The one I did skip over was this one, the grading tools. This gets pretty, you need to have a surface volume in order to do that. This one gets complicated. I've used it in the past for when we were doing natural gas projects. It allows you to move entire large pads of area up and down to balance out, cut and fill, and adjust the elevations of everything. And it will compute it. So let me see if we can look at that real quick. Let me see. Do I have an earth? I do have an earthworks, but I think the definition of it is not accurate. So I'm going to do a quick create surface. I'm going to change it to a tin volume surface. We'll just basin earthworks. And the style will be our cut and fill. Our base surface will be our EG. Comparison surface will be our proposed basin. We're leave the cut fill factors to 1 at this time. Get this nice big green blob here in the middle, meaning we need to go through and set our properties properly. And that's under the properties for this basin surface analysis. We need to have 2 ranges. I like to, this is going to be the cut, so I usually put this at like 100 feet. Hopefully we don't have too many sites that have 100 foot of cut. We got a 0 for our maximum elevation, and I typically change that to be our 10, so that if we did plot this out, it would come out as a color. And then this will be our fill section. So put that at 0, and I usually put this up at 100. And again, I change this to be a color 90, somewhere around a greenish tint, but outside of our normal range. So now we have both that. So anything that's, when they compare the surface, anything that's negative will be red, anything that's positive will be green, and that's just a comparison between the 2 surfaces. You can see we got a lot of cut, but we also have a lot of fill down here. It looks like we have a little hole somehow right in there. We'd have to take a look at that if it was anything significant. I'm going to take this and move display order to the back so that we can see our contours. Now we should be able to go up here. Oh, we need to set a surface for our volume base surface. Hit OK. Now when we go here, we got this new toolbar that allows us to do multiple different things. Now, I haven't used this in a while, so I'm not quite sure how it's going to work. Right now, it looks like move this a little larger. We have 0 cut. See, that doesn't look great at all. 0 cut, lots of fill. Not sure that's correct. Let's see if we're looking at the right group. Proposed basin grading, proposed basin. But we can take this, and it has different options where, well, I think it's this one here. We can actually hit on this very far one over here. We want it to be a, let me see, a balanced cut, earthworks. And you can see it moved things. It lowered the group from our original elevation to this elevation. And now it says that the cut fill should be really close. We're only 26 cubic yards off. You can mess around with this quite a bit. I mean, we don't use it very often. It is available on very large sites where you have one big object that's used multiple times on different sites. It helped me a lot to do this to get me a rough idea of where everything needed to be. So if I hover down over here now, what does it say? Oops, it's going to pick out the tin surface. So we're looking at back here, we're at 4.72 feet of cut. And over here, we're looking at 2 feet of fill. So, like I said, it automatically figured out what's the best as far as getting it close to balancing. Okay, let's see. Again, you can also change it by, you can say 0. I don't know if this will do anything. Nope, it didn't. Should be the same. Yeah, it lowered it slightly. So it did find something a little bit different this time around. It's a little strange, but it's an option to look into when you get a little bit more involved in figuring things out. That's really all I have for today. Let me see here. Again, we went through, we covered, what it has as far as grading creation tools, what are some of the components as far as groups, target surfaces. Um, we looked at some of the styles that are available. We can go into more detail at another time, or when you get a little bit more specific about if there's something that doesn't quite work with your um, project and you need to create a different style. We can always look into that in the future. Um, but it's a pretty quick way to get a rough estimate of where your grades will be, and the basin is a great example of where it can be used. Other parts where it can be grading tools can be used. Grading objects is anytime that you're taking your parking lot and you're tying into the existing. It's a quick way if you already have a feature line to do that grading because it's a consistent 3-to-1, or you need to go to a certain elevation or any option like that. Gives you a way to do it quickly and fairly easily, and be able to change it in the future if you have to. And with that, I think we'll finish up. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions later on, let me know. And all of the materials will be located in the S Drive folder. So if you want to practice yourself on these, you're welcome to do so. Thanks again. Have a great day.